Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Literature,
where we apply the revolutionary Mott scale
to classic and contemporary works of prose.
So, join us once again, won't you?
Hello, and welcome back to the Lost Signals Discusses Literature. My name is Chris Morgan. I am here with my friends Stephen Hermosi.
Aloha.
Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Representing Space Force.
And Scott Thurlow.
All my best friends are blue robots, okay?
And today we are discussing EC Comic 1953. It's a story published EC Comic 1953 called Judgment Day by Al Feldstein. Written by Al Feldstein. The artist is Joe Orlando. And if nobody has, does anybody have a funny log line before we start?
Nah, I mean, I was gonna say one, but I don't think I should, or I'll unfold it to my.
I actually think you just said it. So
yeah, we'll go with that. Some of my best friends are orange robots.
So I'm gonna so we'll discuss more about the background in this as we go along. But Ian, would you like to talk about the plot?
A representative of the Galactic Federation, or I suppose the Earth Force, comes to a planet inhabited solely by robots that's not Mars, and discovers that that these robots have developed an intelligent life and a civilization on this planet, and they're now being kind of auditioning to join the Earth's Federation, and they find out that the robots are racist, and then the representative in the end turns out was black all along. So it's a discussion. Well, we'll talk about themes of it, but the idea is it's a analysis of race, that these robots have the same parts, they're born from the same source, and then the
only difference is literally the color of their chrome out exteriors.
Exactly. As everyone knows, that's the most important way for differentiating robots. And you know what? It's a good story. Oddly enough, and thankfully in this one, it feels dated.
Mm-hmm.
But in a good way, yeah, because like, and I understand it was important at the time when it came out, but overall it's a very simple story of them exploring this place and seeing how the robots are developed and their civilization. So you know, it's a fine too.
I mean, yeah, I mostly agree, and I'm probably going to steal this a bit from you, Chris, but I mean, this is the height of like the golden age of sci-fi, right? 1953, and sci-fi has always been a vehicle to explore, you know, these kinds of real life themes with a fantastical sort of bent to them, you know, a futuristic, you know, kind of veneer on them. And it's the fucking Rick and Morty episode too. Oh, you have square nipples and we have, you know, triangle nipples or whatever. Like, you know, yeah. It's a thing that's been done. But the sad thing is, because it's still a relevant issue in our society. So yeah, like it does feel dated, but like in a non-annoying way, I guess, like in a non-grating way. And yeah, I'll let you go into the background, but as the plot itself, and it's a single issue basically comic strip, right? It's like self-contained.
I mean, it's like 6 or 7 pages. I don't even think it's long enough to be
out to do what it does as a theme, which we'll talk out in a sec. But for that, I will give it a strong /solid 2. I think that's what it deserves, and given its nature.
Yeah, I agree. For the most part, I really enjoyed this, but it wasn't like the most complex exploration of race or anything. It was like, hey, you guys, the way that you're acting is obviously racist. And like, that was probably something that needed to be said in 1953. And just like, I brought out obviously and said like, look, these robots are the same as you inside. The only difference is they're different than you outside. Look, it's the same as people. A black guy taught you this now. Like, you know, it's kind of like, yeah, it's obvious now, or it's a very simple story now, but like, it's something that needed to be said then, and maybe still needs to be said today. And like,
maybe,
you know,
still resonates, man.
Yeah. I honestly, I prefer a more like complex story, but I like what this did. I like what this does, and it does it in a good way. I think the best part of this is going to be later in, you know, style, in terms of the style of it, but that may be because I'm a huge comic books nerd. But yeah, I thought it was good. It's going to get a strong 2 from me as well. And there you go.
I agree. You guys said it perfectly. It's a perfectly solid 2-story. It does what it needs to do. So I'm just going to go right to themes because we all give it a 2, it seems like. And I think the crux of the matter is themes. And the themes of this have to do with obviously prejudice, racism. And the interesting thing about this is that there was a there's a story that was supposed to be published, and it had a black character in it. And the comics code authority said, no, you can't publish that.
Which was still like, sorry, it was like the Comics Code thing was like being formed, like, right, like around the time that it was written and going to be published, right? So like early mid 50s, whatever. They're literally forming the board, the oversight committee to approve of acceptable material in comics, right?
Yeah, I mean the guy who was running EC Maxwell Gaines, actually I believe started the Comics Code Commission because he saw which way the American Affairs bullshit was going, and he wanted to get on top of it and be like, hey, we're going to self-regulate. And of course, as with all bureaucratic things, he said, all right, we're going to run with this story instead. And the code authority said, does he have to be black? And Gaines was like, well, that's the whole point of the story.
Fuck you, it's entirely
He's just like, do you have to have the sweat glisten off of his dark skin? To which, yes, famously, he said, fuck you, slammed the phone and told him to run with it. And if you read the back of this, they actually have some feedback from this was issue 18, from issue 20. A lot of people give it praise, one of which is from New Brunswick, New Jersey. So Jersey represent. So the themes are definitely racism, prejudice. Am I not speaking well tonight?
Racism is not quite a word, but I get what you mean.
But I think the story is, as we said before, this is like the 1950s. My first story on racism. It's like a Dick and Jane book, but it was highly effective at the time, and obviously, the themes really carry. I have to give the themes a 1 because on a meta level, the fact that this story exists, to get this story published, really, it may seem trite now, but was a big deal back then. I mean, EC Comics, comics that had this tremendous fight, and I'm sure Steve-O will be addressing these issues as we go along in other episodes. But, thematically within the story and what happened around the story, I'm going to definitely have to give it a 1.
Yeah, effective, and again, unfortunately still relevant, like to this day, but it does its job well. And like, maybe it's again darkly amusing that behind the scenes, the meta aspect, like it was basically censored by racists when it was trying to like break down the idea of racism. So I still think it gets that point across quite well. And again, a very simple, straightforward, not simple, but straightforward enough way, and digestible manner, and it's well done. So I'm giving it a 1.
There are a couple beyond just the pointing out the silliness of that we're all built from the same parts. It's just that on what's outside is different, and how silly that is. As there is a thing of that humanity only succeeded because it became post-racial. Mm-hmm. It also deals with education and how that is a factor there. That the orange robots have a more robust education system.
Computer is better.
And that does play a factor into it.
And they're allowed to choose their own jobs.
Yes. The only thing I didn't like as a full-fledged Marxist now is that it did glorify free market enterprising. And but you know what? I'll forgive that for it's not just a shallow, actually a kind of a deeper look at racial aspects than I think on the surface it appears.
I didn't mean to come up like
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with that. Like I didn't mean to present that as such. It's an important thing, like I said, straightforward but not simple. And you're right, like good call on mentioning like it touches upon those issues that are again still relevant and not just the one broad umbrella of such, but nuances of it.
Yeah, it dives into systemic racial aspects too.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing that I wanted to mention is this book feels tonally, thematically like there's a story by Dr. Seuss called The Sneetches. If you guys have ever seen this, but like there's basically some of them, they're like big yellow birds. Some of them have stars on their stomachs, some of them don't. So they build a star making machine, and then they build a star moving machine to like continue to like stay different from each other until nobody knows who's who, because the only thing was this one little thing. So that's like the children's version, even though I have to mention that Dr. Seuss is notoriously a known racist himself. But like, so interesting. I think that was more of like a stop treating us other white people like badly because type of story. But regardless, the parallels are kind of there, where it's like this story where you have the society and it's just somebody just kind of showing you why this is silly, why this is stupid. And it goes through, and I think it really works. Interestingly enough, this came out in April 1953, and that Dr. Seuss book I think came out in like July 1953, so the same year. So I guess there was a lot going on in the zeitgeist that year about post World War II interest in some sort of building towards racial equality. But yeah, I think that the theme of this is strong. It's very obvious, but there's nothing wrong with that, especially in terms of a story like this. And it's done well. It's to the point, and it makes the point well. So I'm going to give it a 1.
I do have one odd comment about this, though, is that I actually think the real reveal was done better in Metroid. But no, I'm actually serious about it because it worked. This is what preconceptions of who can be, but in Metroid, it's a similar kind of reveal, except it just with gender. But I feel that it's even hitting harder on the preconceived notions of who can be an action star. But
absolutely. That's not, I mean, that's a really good point. I think the difference is that Metroid doesn't hammer on like, this is why women are strong and can be action stars the whole time, which is not the point of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it does, like, it is a great reveal and like a great twist, if you will, in Metroid. Yeah. This one is about like proving that, that's the case, I think. So it's a little bit of a different angle that it's taking.
Different angle, yeah, exactly. But no, my final thing on themes is that I often look up when we're doing things like I'm a big fan of TV tropes, and there's one I knew would be under this, or I expected, as one called Fantastic Racism, which is like the Rick and Morty stuff, like the Futurama stuff, and then under that it was like it was listed under it, and then God, sorry, I just forgot what you just said something.
Metroid.
I'm sorry, I'm rambling. No, damn it.
The reveal of Samus.
I had something about TV tropes that tied it into it, but I forget. But anyways, I was curious to see if it would have even be an entry, and it was.
Oh yeah, I imagine it's almost a code of. Even though you said about Dr. Seuss, it seems to be an influential work. And considering actually you had mentioned briefly how they had the mail, the people's responses to it at the end in the version we saw, how influential it was at the time, and people like teachers ordering copies of it for their classrooms and things like that. So
sorry, I just remembered. All right, so it's Fantastic Racism, and then like in terms of themes, some anvils need to be dropped. Like essentially, like it's what they said. So sure, nice. It might be like you said, Steve, like an obvious in quotes, like loaded phrase, but still thematically relevant, important, and we're all giving it a 1, I think.
All right. And Scott, why don't you continue on with Antagonist?
Robot racism, as we just said, like it flows through. Like, of course, and as E pointed out, like the whole idea is like Earth has been united, like mankind is now united under one. There's no more divisions such as that, and that's why it's implied that they're able to become a galaxy, whatever universe, spanning civilization. And it's also implied, or at least even outright stated, that humans, like once upon a time, seeded this planet or whatever it is with robots to let them go on their own to see if they would unfold their civilization.
See if they'll be
Yeah.
because it's implied that humans gave them two types of chrome here in order to see if they would become.
Yeah, I mean, like it's yeah, right. It's sort of like dropped in there. Like if you pay attention closely, I don't know, man. Like I'm just saying, like, or maybe the robots use whatever they had, like, and then they just, maybe racism is a natural thing of an evolving species, whether they're
because they
organic or not.
at one point had both gotten together to wipe out the green robots.
Yeah, that's never the backstory of that. They don't even know about the wars of the robot planet. But no, I'm just saying, like, it's obviously that now the character himself, like, maybe isn't antagonized by anything specifically other than the fact that the robots ended up being racist, and thus he judges them unworthy to, join the Federation, essentially, Chris, like, more or less. So, I mean, I still think it works. Like I said, it's heavily, if not like completely tied into themes. So if you give themes a 1, I think you have to give Antagonist a 1 here, and I'm going to do that.
I agree.
I would agree with that. I think that the Antagonist is certainly the, maybe I don't know if the author considers like racism just a stumbling block that every society has to go through at some point or what, but like it certainly seems that way considering it's a robot. The only thing that robots know about, like, I'm not sure how much these robots know about human history or whatever. It seems like they just dropped them off and were like, hey,
that's what I'm saying.
Become a society. And
like the Futurama thing, Steve. Like,
yeah, exactly. Just turns out that everybody's racist for a while until you figure it out. And there is the theme of like, or
that's a dark message,
right? It kind of is.
Everybody, did you say everybody's racist until you figure it out?
Every civilization goes through,
whether organic or non, possibly has that section in their development, in their evolution of society.
I mean, yeah, it's there is that possibility. I'm not like. The other thing is maybe they knew about human history and they're trying, because it seems like in everything else they're trying to mimic humans. Like they come up with cars and stuff. They're like, oh, you're at 20th century about or thereabouts, like whatever. There are like little things in this comic that are like, if you think about them more than just on the surface, it's like they bring up some weird questions. But that being said, I thought that the robots were like nicely antagonized by their want to like get into the Federation or like brought back to Earth to experience the splendor and the bounty or whatever, and then the realization that they weren't ready yet, and the idea of like, oh, we have to keep working on it and all that. So they go through it. There's a nice arc, and I enjoyed it, so I'm going to give Antagonist 1.
I think it worked.
I'm going to generously discuss it as how racism passes through generations, as opposed to just saying it's inherited, because I don't want to believe that is the intent or the message behind this, is that they saw what the parent generation did of humans.
Repeating it. Because they're robots, they just did the same thing. Yeah, true.
Yeah.
So I'm going to I give it a 1.
Sounds good.
Sounds good, man. And that brings us to Steve-O with Protagonist.
Our boy Tarleton.
Tarleton 3000.
Which I think is, like a funny name. They just took the name Carlton, and were like, put a T on the front of that. Sounds futuristic. But no, it's cool to see him go through and like, at first he's just observing, right? He's not in teaching mode yet. Just seeing what the robots have done with the place and saying like, oh, very nice on that. And like every once in a while he'll see something that's kind of fucked up and he'll be like, like taking mental notes. And then as you get towards the end, I think that almost the orange robot that takes him through is almost like a main character as well. Like this is the character that is like actually going through an arc, right? Tarleton doesn't change. The robots are the ones that are like meant to change, to like understand and change. so it is interesting seeing like the main robot, the main orange robot, like explaining how good things are, and then being like uncomfortable having to take him to the blue side of town, and then kind of explaining how the blue robots are like kind of lower sections of society,
quote unquote inferior.
yeah. And then he's like, well, you guys kind of screwed them. And that's when the teaching begins, when they're in the blue factory. And yeah, I mean, I like him as a character, but I almost think that the arc is for the orange robot.
Does he even have a name? I don't think it's just like
I don't remember.
Guide, orange robot guide.
But to like understand that the shit that he's doing is fucked up, and like to figure it out and become and to try and convince the rest of his orange motherfuckers to do better. And I think I'm going to split it between them. And I like the characters. I like that the orange robot is open to change at the end, but doesn't think that the rest of his robots are going to be yet or whatever. Like there is that line. It's like, oh yeah, people won't accept this, and it's like, yeah, well, you got to work on it.
Yeah, but it's also the fear of being the first to suggest change. Yeah, and I actually think that a powerful message that we missed in themes is that it's on an individual level of repairing this kind of prejudice.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Did you say repairing?
Yeah, like it has to be a conscious effort to make that change on the individual level before not expect a society to change first.
And there was a line like I guess I'm somewhat skipping the dialogue, but Tarleton says he's like, like you're only one robot, yes, but then you can spread the word to your other oranges, if you will, etc. But I mean, I do like the way you cut it up, Steve-O, that like Tarleton is himself the whole time. He's basically an observer, like almost like a vehicle, really not quite like the focal point. But I do think it's a nice split, and I'll give them both credit, and probably enough for a solid 1 for sure. Certainly not a 0.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, a nice catch there, Ian, on something we missed on themes. Because there's a couple things I'm going to circle back to towards the end. But in the meantime, Ian, why don't you tell us about the supporting characters?
Robots. 0.
All other non-guide robots.
This isn't even necessarily a civilization. This is a built for a theme, and yeah, the world they built out is fine, but it's not fleshed out at all. So I can't, in good justice, give it anything beyond give it any points.
I mean, I definitely agree. Like, at least that's how I view it. So, Chris, and go back to TV tropes. It's a planet of hats, and their hat is that they're orange robots, and he talks to the one orange robot hat guy, like essentially. So yeah, like you're right. It's not the point, it's not the focal, thrust of it, and that's fine. Like, it's supposed to get across what we just said, but that means like, yeah, the rest of them are just literally faces like they're the same. They look the same because they're fucking robots built.
Are you saying all orange robots look the same?
Yes, in the story they do. The story presents them as such. They might look the same.
I can't believe it.
They can change their ideology, and that's different here.
It is truly as Skeeches then, right?
But yeah,
yeah.
But yeah, like all I'm saying is like just because of that, as he said, just piggybacking on it, like yeah, default 0, nothing, not because it's bad, etc., but just not the point. It wasn't the intent. It wasn't going ever to be like the focal, like I said, of it. So
yeah, I agree. I think that like blue robots have like 3 lines in this, and that's it. And then it's just the main orange robot is the only other one that talks, who I already said was a protagonist. So I can't give much credit for supporting. That wasn't the point, as you mentioned, Scott. So 0.
I agree. I knew that this would come down to whether we counted both Charlton and the Orange Robot as protagonists, or if we were going to have one as a supporting and one. But yeah, I think clumping them together as protagonists, And then so yeah. So I agree with you, Zero. Steve-O, you're zero?
Mhm.
Yours is that zeros all around then?
Yep. Zeros all around.
Okay. And that comes to me with dialogue. The dialogue is pretty straightforward. Without the dialogue, the dialogue. I mean, I guess you could have told this story without dialogue, but the dialogue is important. And it is what you'd expect from a 1950s comic. And there was no, as we said before, there's nowadays it's more of an, I don't want to minimize it because this is important historically. But yeah, the dialogue is fine. Without the dialogue, there would be no way to flesh these things out to start these discussions, because I think the whole point of the story is, and I think you brought it up, Ian, as to, was you say overcome and understand, to overcome things, to learn
or repair. I believe I used
the what?
Repair.
But this is a conversation starter. So this is a conversation, and it's to get you thinking. I'm going to give it a 1 because it does it just fine.
I'll actually go a little bit beyond that. Is I really liked the orange robot stumbling over his need to justify his prejudice, because it seems obvious to him, but having to explain it to an outsider, it starts falling apart. And I thought that was actually a really interesting point of view, and that's why I think this resonates so much.
That's why I'm giving it a 1. Like, yeah, Chris, you're right. Like, I don't want to diminish the way it's done, but I mean that's the way a lot of the stuff was back in, again, 60 years ago in the golden age, where it's like it's very more exposition-y ish. It's like I said, we all said straightforward, short. That doesn't mean it's bad. Is it the most poetic and most elegant way this stuff has been stated? No, it doesn't have to be, though, but it does hold up. It gets across, again, its point and its issue, and ostensibly to make the reader think, in theory. And so it does its job perfectly fine. So a solid enough 1, all good.
Yeah, for the most part, I agree. There's one line that stuck with me, and I'm not even really sure why, but it's like a blue robot comes over to him right when they go into the factory, and he says, "Allow me to apologize for the appearance of our plant. Our funds are limited." And he just says, "I understand." And then they kind of move on, but it's this I understand ... That's I don't know. For some reason that hit me. It's I get it, man. You don't have to explain to me. But I think dialogue is competently done for the most part, and you're right. There is that moment where it's kind of laid bare how bad of an argument it is that orange robots are better because they're orange and blue robots are worse because they're blue, and trying to justify that when you realize that it's a terrible argument. The moment that you realize something like that is I mean, it happens all the time to people, and the way that you handle it is a big part of how you move forward and as a human being in general. So yeah, I like that, and I'm gonna give it a 1 for dialogue.
Yeah, Steve-O, it's really funny because I was just like, oh crap, I forgot the thing about the blue robot. So in addition to everything, you've also got shades of income inequality as well. So yeah, there's actually a lot to unpack. I feel as we go into it, I feel bad about kind of glazing over it a little bit, but also it's one of these things that after almost 6 years of doing this, I still get flustered driving the ship, hosting these shows. So I'm very.
There'll never be a Starfleet
captain. But by the same token,
you wear.
But by the same token, it's good that we're all here, so we help flesh each other out. What did you say, Scott?
Go on.
That's what our reading group is for. It's to discuss concepts of workplace.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
and still, I think we all are, right?
Yeah, so we're giving all giving dialogue a 1, and Scott, you're with style.
So it's pretty Xeros, which I mean, I happen to like it. Like, I guess obviously your tastes could vary, like depending on or not, but I think it holds up. Like, yeah, it sort of has that washed out feel, but because it's a comic from the 50s, like, we read it in a PDF that you linked, Chris. So like, I'm sure whoever to copy it, like, had to have an actual copy of this shit. It's probably faded to hell, and it probably wasn't all that vibrant even when it was printed, because like the printing technology just wasn't as good as it is now. But all that to say, like, I'm giving it a 1. I think it holds up. And like I said, I do personally kind of like this stuff. Like, when I see it, like, it's kind of like the Fallout-ish thing where it's like, it's not even referencing that because it is that from that era in a sense. But the artwork, I think, was really well done. It was stylized in a sense, but also realistic. Right? It's not too fantastical. You know, proportions, etc. Robots look like 1950s robots, as you can find. Like, Google 1950s robot comics, like, you find thousands of images of similar ones, and it holds up. It's perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with it. I think it's actually a little stronger, like maybe like the third or fourth strongest point of this little, one-off little issue, and I'm gonna give it a pretty damn solid 1.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really into comics, and I love this old style. Especially, there's some artists that are just awesome at doing it, and Joe Orlando had a very long and prestigious career as an illustrator. So like, his style is, it's his own. Like, it's obvious, but it's also like a lot of people have tried to imitate it, and he was a big part of what comics became in the years after he broke in. So like, he I really like the style of this, and it always reminds, like, looking at old comic, or like looking at the details in old comics like these, some of them are really cool, just to go back and see kind of what went into making these panels are pretty freaking detailed for comics panels. You can see right behind me the detail on this robot's cod piece, which is impressive. but yeah, I mean, I love the look of these.
Why did the civilization feel the need to have? I guess they are trying to imitate human.
Because
Yeah.
exactly. You answered your own question.
But I think that all that detail was done really well. It's actually pretty incredible looking at, and later on this month we're gonna go do a deep dive on our philosophy and narratology show about understanding comics, and I hope to talk to you guys a lot more about similar type of stuff. But like, it's really impressive with the amount of text that is in this comic, because it's super text heavy, how much detail he was able to fit into the panels and stuff like that. So and he does like little interesting things with the alleys, the space between the panels, that a lot of other artists later on did a lot more crazier shit, but like, there's just little interesting things that go on between in the space between these panels, even that I really liked, including kind of like staggering the panels and stuff like that. So check it out, read it for yourself, and take a look at things like that. But I like the style of this a lot, and I'm gonna give it a 1.
Go ahead, D.
Subjectively, I didn't care much for it. I don't appreciate comics the way the rest of you do. Objectively, I have to give it a 1. Subjectively, I'd probably give it a 0. But it feels dated to me. But again, it's weird. One of my favorite comics is quick tangent, is a very photorealistic comic. That's what I'm interested in, is the perception of reality, not necessarily the art of it. Which is, again, I am trying to rate this though. And I, from what you said, Steele, I will cede my opinion to you there, because I think it's an art form I don't appreciate, but I can appreciate that it is an art form. So I will probably give it a 1. All right, we'll give it a 1, not probably.
Okay. I'm gonna give it a 1 as well. And one of the little touches I like is that he's got if you're watching the video, you see that behind Steve-O is Tarleton in he's got a big space helmet on. And underneath the clear visor of it, he looks like a robot. There's a second helmet on. It makes him look like a robot. So even in this society, he's making sure he doesn't look human, that he looks like
reflection of the robot, Chris, which I thought was
no, it's I think it's
no, he's definitely got another helmet on underneath.
Yeah,
right,
but I'm kind of I whether or not there's intentional, I kind of like the fact that like he doesn't want to let on that he's human, that he's one of them, that it's because it's kind of easier. I guess it would be an easier pill to swallow. I don't know. I just think but I think, you know, there's a twist. There's that reveal at the end where we find out that he's a black man. But, you know, I think just the fact that he has to hide the fact that he's human at all from the society is also kind of interesting.
I imagine that humans, assuming that other civilizations want to join them, have been met by much resistance over independent species and have slaughtered them, rightfully so.
Maybe it's a defense tactic or something.
Yeah.
The unfiltered background lore of this universe.
Perhaps.
Either way, I think it works. So
we got to spread democracy to this robot planet.
And Steve-O, that leaves us with you with style.
Yeah, I recommend it. I think it's
recommend. I'm sorry. Go on.
Yeah, I recommend it. I think it's a good little short story. You know, it'll take you 10 minutes to read, maybe slightly more, but not much. And you know, it's a nice little morality type tale that's done quickly and efficiently, and has a twist that no one in 2021 is going to be surprised about probably, but it still works for what it is. And yeah, I would say you can definitely waste 10-15 minutes in a lot worse ways than, or spend 10 to 15 minutes in a lot worse ways than reading this story. Check out Judgment Day.
Yeah, I mean, I also recommend it pretty easily enough. Like you said, everything you said. And again, for the fact that the background research, I think, makes it, I don't know, if not more relevant, just a more interesting case that makes it maybe stand out from other like tales and even comic stories like this. But certainly it's worth a read, and I recommend it.
I agree with you on that, so I'm going to recommend it.
Yeah, I obviously I recommended it to you guys, and yeah, I this came on my radar a few years ago with, funny enough, one of the truck reviewers I listened to online brought it to my attention. And I know there's a lot of talk about diversity casting from people like, you know, Ben Shapiro, you know, a lot of criticism, all the
You shouldn't listen to
using PC incorrectly. And the story of this shows what, and as we were talking about with like Metroid and so forth, it just goes to show like the fight that representation took to get representation on TV or on any medium. The fact that, you know, even in 1970s, Samuel Delaney was fighting with John W. Campbell. You know, Campbell was, you know, an editor for a pulp magazine. He was like saying, you know, the world's not ready for a black protagonist or gay protagonist or everything like that. You know, the struggles. I mean, these are all part of a thing. So by itself, it's a nice little tale. As you all point out, it's not going to take more than a few minutes to read. The backstory is fascinating, but the relevance to the whole thing is, I think this is a good conversation to start to have. And I think just the whole thing surrounding this in the real life is an important conversation to have. And may I say, and I'm sorry, and if anybody's watching me, yes, I am wearing a uniform from Discovery. It occurred to me last night, as ironically enough, I was making the bed to go to bed, that Discovery is the first Star Trek show with the only heterosexual white male as a cast regular is in costume. He's an alien. So for diversity, I'm celebrating the fact that, yes, we've got a show now where the cis white male is in makeup, being another member of diversity. And I'm, like I said, I know I bring truck up a lot, but I think with regard to what it took to get stuff like this out there, where we've come, and then it had to have been a conscious effort to do so. So I'm sorry, don't mean to get on the pulpit, but this has been a lot on my mind this week. For anybody who's listening to this, not, in January 2021, the events of January 6th. Yeah, the hypocrisy.
Seriously, you got to think about that.
Yeah, Christ.
I know it feels like a week within a day.
But we have the duality of the way different people are treated based upon their skin color. Now, I'm opening up
a half buffalo man was allowed to be for the first time ever in Congress.
So it was in the Congress room floor, so if that can happen, then.
So I'm sorry, I recommend it too. I didn't mean to sidetrack, but there was a method to my madness for everything around this. It just all the stars kind of aligned, and I just wanted to say that. So at the end of the day, we all recommended it. We all gave it an 8, which gives us an aggregate score of 8. We all said it was a fine too.
Fine. Yeah. Hell yeah.
Mm-hmm. We all agreed that the two main characters shared protagonist duties, and that there was no real supporting character of consequence. The supporting character. What was it? The Council of Hats?
Planet of Hats.
Planet of Hats, yes.
Come on, you're a Star Trek nerd. I remember that episode. Anyway.
Sorry. But anyway, if anybody has anything else to say, I know I took this, broke the fourth wall on it, but without further ado, thank you for joining us. My name is Chris Morgan. I've been here with Stephen Armosi.
Have a good night.
Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Chris, you're wearing the wrong color shirt. It should be red.
And Scott Thurlow.
And I don't want to live in this planet anymore. Good night. See you next
Peace
time.
and long life.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.